In today's project, I'm going to be using Folk Art Home Decor chalk paint and a wood round from Home Depot. The first thing I'm going to do is make a stain. To make the stain, first I'm going to create the color that I'm looking for. This is the nice thing about being able to make your own stain, is you can sort of make it whatever you want it to be. I'm mixing a bunch of different folk art colors together to get sort of a warm, soft rust color. And then I add water, mix that up. You don't want a thick consistency for a stain. You want it to be watered down. I do want to be able to see the wood grain. I'm going to take one of my daughter's mismatched socks and put that on my hand, dip it into the stain, and start applying it all over the wood round. I apply the stains to both sides and the edges of the wood round. It is important to note that I did sand the wood round with a 220 sandpaper beforehand to just get any rough edges off. And you do need to do that because when you get these from the hardware store, they are a little bit rough. And I went through all of the wood rounds at the hardware store and picked the ones that didn't have any divots in them or dings or, the ones that were the smoothest. I have a little stack of them because I'm making more than one of these. This is actually the third one that I've made. The first one I made was for Mother's Day for my mom, and I will get into that story in a little bit. After applying your coat of stain, you're going to want to wipe off the excess with a dry cloth. This wood round is very personal to me. I'm making it in memoriam of my grandmother. And in front of her house, she had a big Korean weeping cherry tree. There's a lovely story about my grandfather planting this tree at the end of this video, and you can pause the video and read it, written by my grandmother. So I found a free Google image and traced it and cut it out using my silhouette. But you can find any image that's personal to you and trace that or cut it out. There are a lot of free images out there. And so I created a stencil, and it's not perfect, but that's okay because it's going to be stenciled on here, and I'm also putting some lettering on top of it. You're not going to see any imperfections in the tree, and the tree has so many branches that you don't notice if one of the little details is missing. So I wasn't too worried that a few of the pieces didn't quite make it onto the board. It was a lot of small pieces. After I adhere the stencil to the wood round, I'm just going to peel back the transfer paper so that I can start applying my paint. I picked a dark brown color because I am going with a rust and earthy tone for this particular wood round. It's going in my cousin's home, and that's her vibe, so I'm going to go with it. After applying one solid coat, I'm going to immediately peel back the stencil. I've had issues with previous ones pulling up some of the finish off of the wood round, so it might be better to wait until your paint is dry to pull up the stencil, but I just went for it, and I was just very carefully removing all of the tiny, teeny little pieces, and this took me an eternity. But it was worth it because when you see the willow tree on the round, the detail is beautiful. For the lettering for the wood round, I wanted to use my grandmother's handwriting. I looked through all of the letters and notes that I had from my grandmother. My sisters looked, my cousin looked, and we could not find one that said the word hello. My grandmother always said hello, hello, hello 3 times, always. So I ended up piecing letters together, and I pieced an H with an E and 2 L's and an O, and even though it's not her writing, the word hello, it is her handwriting, and it works for me. And it's still sentimental. After I pieced the letters together, cut and paste style, I traced them out on my silhouette and created a stencil. I also wanted to put my grandmother's name on here so that when people saw it, they knew it was a quote from my grandmother. And I used sheepskin by Folk Art just to have a good contrast. And this time for the stencil, I used a dauber. The last time I used a sponge roller. But for lettering, I think the dauber was the right move. And again, you're going to see here, I peel it off right away. I just didn't want the adhesive to take off any of the paint that was already on the board. So even though it was still wet, I peeled it back. After the whole thing was dry, I did a thick coat of Mod Podge. That is the only thing I had on hand. I think a polyurethane would have been better. I do believe this is going to be displayed inside my cousin's home. If it is put outside, I might tell her to do a coat of polyurethane if she's going to put this on her front door. My mom has hers on her front door, and it looks so great. This is it for this project. Once this dries, I did hang some D-rings on the back. Oh, and I went over this with a sponge brush just to smooth everything out. I didn't want there to be any like fogginess from the Mod Podge, but it has a really nice finish, and here's a photo of the finished work. This is extremely personal to me and my family, but you can make yours just as personal just by adding some meaningful touches. Thank you, and goodbye.